How you doing tonight? IB Nation Sports Talk up and running. He's Vince D'Addario. I'm Sean Stiers. It's Mailbag Day. Shake
Yes.
it, shake it, shake the mail. Vince has got new IB gear on. He was just telling me about it
Woo.
before we were getting started. There, it looks good.
I'm kind of
Big swag.
excited about it. I mean, we got the name brand. I know people are obsessed with Adidas because it was before Under Armour, and nobody likes Under Armour apparently. So, they should like that. And I from what I understand, and I don't want to put my foot in my mouth here, but I was told that it's going to be in the merch store. Whether it
Nice.
is currently or it is on the way, I'm not sure. But I will say from now, personal experience, it is a must-have. I am pretty fired up about it.
My wife won't be happy with me if I get it, but because she says I have so much of that kind of stuff around. But
I mean, that's probably
especially
not
these days with basket, with
inaccurate.
like Notre Dame women's basketball. I've been swagged up the last couple of years quite a bit. So
That's a solid point because of basketball, you're back in the swing.
yeah, I'm getting quite the collection of Under Armour shoes for one.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Didn't even think about that.
Yeah. So I'll have to show you what I got. What size do you wear, by the way? Are you like a 10, 10 and a half?
No, I'm like a 12.
Your foot is that big?
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I'm like an 11 and a half, but they're wide. So I usually get a
Okay.
12 to account for the width. So
Gotcha.
not to get too personal about my shoe size, but
All right. Well, no beating around the bush. Derek skipped his grandma's 99th birthday. Didn't skip it for nothing.
Derek is
I'm
always
starting to
skipping
think-
the big family events, man.
Yes, I'm starting to like. Did you ever see the movie Airplane? Like the old
Yes, it's been a while, but yes.
Airplane where there's like the guy in the tower is like, I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. I picked the wrong week to, quit drinking and whatever. It's like I'm feeling like Derek is just, that's every week it's something new that he's skipping to be here, but we appreciate it for sure.
I love it.
Well, get your questions in because and Tommy Guns caused a 50-car pileup to be here.
Fled the scene. It's
yeah.
not good, Tommy.
Yeah. I was just reading something online, by the way, speaking of pileups, like when you're driving down the highway and all of a sudden one lane's closed and how like people tend to get over really early, into the lane, like if the left lane's closed, they get over early into the right-hand lane. Apparently the right way to do it, and this is like documented, like there are states that are putting out instructional videos on how you're supposed to do it. It's called the trucker method.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It's I saw Derek say it's what truckers do. It's called the zipper method.
That's why I was doing
this.
Yep.
That's right. So like if you've got a car on the right and then you've got your car on the left gets over like this, and the one in front, the one behind, just like a zipper.
Yeah.
So you should not get over early.
Right.
So we need to educate the public so this can become a thing, and you're not getting mad at guys who are
zooming past
the line. That's right. Basically, you wouldn't have all the congestion if you did this zipper thing.
Everybody
everyone getting over a mile early.
That is true. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And everybody will still be ticked off because it'll feel like everybody's cutting the line.
I know. Exactly. And there will always be people who say you're cutting the line by doing it.
Yes.
So
but I have heard of the zipper method. Part of it is because I have a son currently doing driver's ed type stuff.
Okay.
So we have conversations about that sort of thing. And I have to say, I don't know. Of course, I'm just going off the rails here. But when Jesse started driving, and I assume he did most of his practice with you, I'm just going to go out on a limb.
Right.
Did you enjoy being carted around while he was driving? How did that work for you? Because I kind of, after I got over the initial, like, complete fear of dying, I kind of enjoy being driven around.
Hit and miss. I guess I'd say.
Okay.
The big thing with him is I did what my dad made me do. I made him learn to drive a stick. Remember, I used to have the Jeep, and the Jeep was a stick shift, and he ended up getting the Jeep, after I got a different vehicle at some point. But he had to learn to drive the stick before he was allowed to drive anything else. So that was that was adventurous. Like we would go over to Notre Dame in the big parking lot
Yep.
over there and kind of tool around in the parking lot and do those
Learn it.
kind of things.
Learning a stick is much more complicated than we're learning an automatic. That is for
Yeah, I
sure.
taught my wife to drive a stick because for some reason, and her dad is, like an old school, fix the car guy and all that kind of stuff. He never taught her to drive a stick, and so she burned the stick out in the car that I had when we started dating. Like,
Yikes.
you could smell the clutch coming. She burned the clutch out, is what I mean
You
to say.
smell it coming.
Smell the clutch from miles away. Yes.
Oh my goodness.
It was something.
Yeah, it is something. My dad had a stick, so I learned how to drive stick, but nobody else in this household knows how to drive stick. That's for sure.
Always learn to drive a stick. If
Yeah.
there are fewer and fewer out there, but if you're in an
Yes.
emergency and the only option is a stick, you're going to need the stick someday.
That's all I'm
So
saying. I haven't
goes
done
the
it in a
stick.
long time, but I feel like it's right, like riding a bike. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you got to get used to the actual stick that you've got. But I do enjoy. I kind of liked it because it kept me focused on what was going on. You know what I mean? It's not just sitting back and being lazy and driving the automatic. So
Shannon says, figured
oh,
out a name for my stuffing in the waffle maker, which I did again tonight. Final time, by the way, just ran out of stuffing tonight before I went on the air. Kid, you can now market the stuffle. I like that. I like that a
ooh,
lot. Might have to do that.
nice.
I like that. Good call, Shannon. Good call. Jason says he roasted his dad's clutch as well. And I remember there was this parking lot that had a really steep incline, and my dad had an El Camino, and it was an El Camino that must have been a half a ton. That thing was so big, and we were coming. So, and this is like early days of driving, and I'm trying to get out of this parking lot with it literally the incline is like this. And of course I killed it, and he starts barking at me. I can't even tell you all the things that
Oh,
he
I'm
said.
sure.
So, because it's like you're waiting for traffic, and then finally your opening comes and you kill the clutch, So those were the days. Those were the days. And my son wonders why I'm the way I am. He sees old grandpa, grandpa's mellow now. Grandpa wasn't always mellow,
Yeah.
I think most people can relate to that. So yesterday was the anniversary of Brian Kelly leaving, which we discussed on the show. Salty says, hope you had a fabulous BK Independence Day. I think that's a good
not
one
bad.
right there. BK Independence Day.
That's
I
not
like that.
bad.
Yeah.
That's not bad at all, actually. I like
I
that.
saw another one.
There
I
was.
saw another one.
I thought
in
you
here.
started, but I'm not
Did it
100%
slip
sure on
away
that.
from? It must have slipped away from me. But there was another good one that I saw as well. It's probably long gone by
Hold
now.
on.
You gonna try to find it?
Yeah, here it is.
There you go. BK Goniversary. That's not bad either. Although it sounds kind of like a disease that you would have. It's a new culture, a new attitude at ND Go Irish. The old Goniversary.
Okay, I see where you're coming from now. Oh boy. I'm
right,
gonna have to sit and think about this one.
Yeah, I know.
There's gotta be a good something we can coin that we can talk about every year. So yeah. I got the clinking glasses from Jason. I like that. So yeah, it's something to celebrate for sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
And by the way, just to tease rapid fire, you have a great question in there about Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman, and the season. So
All right. Glad you liked it.
That's the one I was I'm really kind of excited about that.
All right. So you're fired up about that one.
I am.
Okay. I like it. And speaking of which, this will come up from Tyler.
Yeah.
Cam Hart will come up in rapid fire. I figured it was probably going to come up since it was mailbag night, but we're saving the Cam Hart talk for rapid fire. So we'll save that for a little bit. So we'll get into that. So in the meantime, hit the like button if you would. Glad to have you here on mailbag night. Now that we've talked about merging traffic and driver's ad and and everything else, there was a question that I wanted to start with that came in early. It came in early enough that I was able to find a little bit on this guy. Malik Washington would be an interesting wide receiver to look at. He has entered the transfer portal. I looked him up. Remember that, and they got Ben Skoranek from Northwestern a couple of years ago, but grad transfer from Northwestern, plays the slot, close to 700 receiving yards this year. I've got his stats. right here. 65 catches, 694 yards and a touchdown. Last year, 44 receptions for 578 and 2 touchdowns. So pretty good numbers
Sure.
last couple years. And he has entered the market as a grad transfer. And, with that Northwestern pedigree, that kind of seems like right up Notre Dame's alley.
I will say that I am not 100%. I don't know Malik Washington from, I've never looked at his film.
Yeah,
right?
me either. This
So,
is like the first time I've really
right.
heard of it.
So I will go off of not specifically to Malik because one thing I'm not sure. So he's in the transfer portal. Do you see where he is as far as his schooling is concerned? Is he a young kid? Do you know that by a chance?
He's been there for 4 years. So I would assume he's got his degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't have to
he
worry
should be
about
a grad transfer.
can he get in, can he not get in? Okay.
Right.
The way the numbers stack up is I believe Notre Dame will be at 9 receivers. Okay. I will say that 10 is the ideal number in my opinion. So bringing in somebody I have no problem with. In fact, I think that's probably something that they should look at, depending on where the scholarship numbers fall. I will also say that I don't necessarily care about their stats at Northwestern or anywhere for that matter, because you still need a quarterback to get him the ball.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Skoranek didn't have monster stats at
Right.
Northwestern. And quite frankly, I never would have thought Ben Skoranek would be an NFL wide receiver, even come through here. But look at where he is a couple years later. He's got Super Bowl.
Well, and that's, my bigger issue is that, that's great. He's got good stats. He's obviously a polished kid, a kid who has done good things, but he still needs a quarterback to get him the ball. Like, I don't have an issue with the receivers that Notre Dame had on the field.
I see what you're saying.
It was the fact that they couldn't get the football to him. That was more the issue than anything else, in my personal opinion. Now, but from a numbers standpoint, I wouldn't mind having one more, right? If everybody comes back that we think is going to come back and all those things, I think they have 9. So getting a 10th, that's cool. I'm cool with that. That would be fine. But they're also bringing in some smaller guys, some slot guy, Dylan Edwards, I believe. I know Ryan and Brian talk about recruiting a lot more than we do. They've got some smaller guys coming in who will fill that role. They're just going to be true freshmen. So that's, do you trust a true freshman? Do you want to bring in somebody with experience? That's up to the coaching staff, to be honest with you. But one more body is fine.
And if they're only going to get one guy or even just 2 guys, they have to be really judicious in who they're looking at. They're not just going to bring anyone in. Now, slot is a position of need, I think, even though, as we've talked about, Chris Tyree, I think, makes sense seeing more action in the slot next year, especially when you bring back, when Jadarian Price is back from the injury, that running back room is going to expand. You've also got Jabron Payne, and you've got the incoming freshman as well. So that, that group is going to get a little bit bigger. Does it make sense to use Tyree in other facets beyond just running the football? I think.
Yeah, I think
could be part of the equation as well.
You need to utilize Chris Tyree in a better way, period. Yeah. They need to get him the football, and I don't mind if they're getting it to him from the backfield or the slot or whatever, but you need to have a better Chris Tyree plan, period, right? I don't want him switching positions to be a slot receiver. I think he can do a lot more as a multi-back, but they need to use it. They need to take advantage of the skill that he has, right? So, yes, the answer is yes. They need to put him in the slot more often, for sure. Yeah.
Chase Talk Sports question: if a quarterback transfers to Notre Dame that is Tommy's desired style, pocket passer who can somewhat escape, would you like to see a Tyler Buchner package like with Jack Cohn?
I'm not a big fan of packages, if I'm being honest with you. I want a starting quarterback. This is me personally. I don't want to have to think about, okay, did we get so-and-so enough snaps? Is this a good time to bring in that package? Like, that's just not a line of thinking that I want to have as a offensive coordinator. Now, maybe that's something that Tommy wants, but that is not something that I would want. So I don't like that idea. I think if you want a guy that's going to be good in the pocket, but you also want a guy with some escapability and some ability to run the football. He doesn't need to be a runner, period, right? And Tyler Buchner was used as a runner, but that's not who he is now. So I think that would, if I'm Tyler Buchner and you came to me and you said, hey, we're going to have a package for you, bye, I'm out. Like that's
Yeah.
not where he needs to be either. Like that doesn't
Right.
benefit him in any way. So I
He's
don't
not
like that.
developing anymore, just running this
No.
back, because part of the reason last year with Tyler Buckner, true freshman, hadn't played in a couple of years. One of the reasons was just getting him on the field, getting him used to being back on the field again because he missed his senior season of high school football due to the pandemic. So, like, get him on the field, and presumably it was also going to help with an eye toward this season because the guy, now he ends up preserving this season from an eligibility standpoint because of the injury, but he shot his entire freshman season of eligibility because of being the package guy. And
Right.
I think you're exactly right. There's no benefit to Tyler Buckner at that point.
No.
Either he's running the full offense or he's not. And that's where he needs to be. He needs to be running the full offense. And as we've talked about before, I really don't like the fact that when you have one quarterback like Buckner who has the mobility skill set, and then you've got a guy more like Drew Pine or Jack Cohn. Obviously Pine has a little bit more mobility than Cohn did, but pocket passer versus dual threat kind of guy, you're running two completely different offenses.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see one offense for everybody. Kind of what you let off with. Tired of the package stuff. Let's see one offense for everybody. I understand maybe a change of pace. He can do, some things with his legs, but I don't think Tyler Buckner is going to go for that. Why should he burn a season of eligibility being a change of pace guy when, again, he's only got, just like everybody, he's only got so much time in college. Either he's a regular quarterback or he's not.
Right.
So
agreed completely.
Yeah, I think, and then you got, you're adding Minchie into the mix as well at this point.
Mm-hmm.
USMA 87. Just wait, Vince. Driver's training with twins is great in California. You have to log 60 hours behind the wheel. I spent way too many hours driving around with my boys.
I believe this is because he knows I have twins, and in Indiana, that I know now, it is 50 hours of time. So that would be 100 for the twins. And so I am not looking forward to that. Dylan's, my son, I'm getting those out of the way, no problem, because he drives me to and from school every day. So we're going to get those hours taken care of, no problem.
Yeah.
And we also have a tournament this weekend in Indianapolis. And so he's going to be driving to and from. It's going to be great. Hours are racked up. So, but yeah, the twins, not looking forward to that at all. Luckily, I have about 2.5 years to wait on that one.
I can see that. Here's an interesting question here from Ian. What do you think about making either Hiestand or McCullough the run game coordinator, make our run calls more than just duo?
I think that it's semantics, to be perfectly honest with you. Those guys have a say in what the game plan is and what the running game plan is for the team as a whole, not just game to game. Those guys all have a say, right? And whether you make them a run game coordinator or not, I don't think that changes anything, if I'm being honest. I think that's semantics.
Well, and I don't know this for sure, but I don't think they were using duo when Quinn was here, right? Like it was more outside
that's
zone.
Accurate. Yeah, I think that's accurate.
So because I remember seeing duo being practiced during training camp, so I guess I wonder how much input Harry Hiestand had with that, that implementation to begin with.
Right.
I would think that he had to be a part of that decision. Like, this is the run scheme that we're going to go to. I would think.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And when you've got a run game coordinator and a pass game coordinator and all those different things, it's not like those guys are calling plays on game day either, right? It's either a combination deal or it's hey, they get the game plan together and then Tommy Reese is going to call the plays. So those guys are still involved. Usually, and I'm not saying that would be specific to Notre Dame, but usually when somebody gets a run game coordinator or something along those lines, it's a pay bump. It's a resume builder. They're trying to enhance their resume, right? And so I think there was another question in there about, do you make Mike Mickens the assistant defensive coordinator? You know what I mean? I don't think that really changes his day-to-day. That just gives him an opportunity for a raise, and it helps his resume moving forward, right?
Right.
It doesn't really change anything with the way that they go about their business normally.
Right. Jason asks if Salerno has another year. He says, part of me hopes he doesn't because I want to see reps going to the youngsters. I think he technically does, but it's not like he had the decision to make about declaring for the NFL versus staying in school, and he was recognized on senior day. So
Right.
I have to think that means that
And
Matt Salerno is sailing
yeah.
off into the sunset.
And I believe he also accepted one of those bowl, like the All-Star game invitations.
Okay, I hadn't seen
So, I believe that that's accurate. I thought I saw that come through at one point. So I believe he is done. I was looking at the roster. He's listed as a graduate student / senior. So I think he actually may be out of, but there's always the COVID year and
Yeah, and that's what, yeah.
but
And
yeah,
that whole COVID year just makes everything much
yes,
more
it does.
confusing.
I can't wait until we're far enough away from that
I
that we
know.
don't have to worry about the COVID year because
I think
that
we've got,
just,
what, 2 more cycles maybe
ugh,
by the time
brutal,
to get rid of that, something
brutal.
like that. Yeah, I think the junior class this year is the cutoff. Like, if you're a
Okay.
junior this year, the COVID year was your freshman year, so that's where it
Gotcha.
began.
Makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's nothing against Matt Salerno, but my guess is they didn't ask him back if they have that opportunity. Maybe they did. Maybe he told him he's good to go. Like maybe he said, I'm ready to move on. And which is definitely a possibility. But again, you do kind of need bodies in that wide receiver room right now,
Yeah.
though, too. So you got to kind of balance that. You're going to go get him in the portal. You're going to keep a guy around that is a good fit for your program. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
there is a balancing act there, but it sounds like specifically to him that he is gone.
But, I mean, that's also why, like you talked about, well, they've got a couple freshmen slot type coming
Right.
in. The fact that they are freshmen, I think that if you can find, a veteran like the Northwestern guy that we started off talking about, Malik Washington, at that position, just
Yeah.
based on still, like the whole receivers seeing the field with regularity did not become more of a thing, just because Brian Kelly moved on this
Yeah.
year. So, like a 1-year guy with experience, I think, it's not a bad idea, but still it comes down to you've
Right.
got to find the right guys to come
Right.
in and do it. They've got to be guys who you have pretty much like 99% certainty are going to jump in and contribute right away.
Yeah.
Couple defensive questions
Ooh, sweet.
that I saw here. Lucas, let's talk Rover. Okay, Lucas,
Let's do that.
let's do that. Does Al Golden prefer to play an extra DB more than a rover? Kaiser's snap count was around 450 with Leafau and Bertrand over 600. Or is it purely week-to-week game plan thing? I think I know where you'll go, but go ahead and start.
Well, for me, I think this year specifically, and with the offenses that they faced most of the time, I think their base package was basically nickel.
Yes.
I mean, that was their base package, and
Exactly what
most
I
of
would
most of those snaps for Kaiser came on the inside, and a lot of them
Right.
came against Navy. And so I think that whether, and I don't know what Golden's preference would be, but I think from a personnel standpoint at Notre Dame and the teams that they were playing against, nickel became their base. And besides Tariq Bracy, and I don't remember if it was a show I was on or if I was listening to the guys this afternoon, it all runs together. But Tariq Bracy is arguably one of your best defensive players, and he plays the nickel. You want him on the field, right? And so that was another reason I think that they went to the nickel an awful lot, because it got Tariq on the field. So there was a multitude of reasons, but I think in this day and age, you're probably going to go to a nickel more often than you would to a rover, unless you get that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah type of rover that you don't ever have to take off the field.
Yeah, and he's still a rarity. He's still the only guy
Exactly.
that they've had that kind of confidence in being able to
Right.
pull that off, staying on the field, more often than not. So, yeah.
Right.
That's just the biggest thing. There's more, and really, like if Notre Dame was in the Big 12, they'd probably be playing nickel all the time. They wouldn't even have the rover, So
Absolutely.
unless maybe they're playing Iowa State, I don't know, but that would kind of be about it. Anthony, gentlemen, are you guys all right with not bringing back the linebackers for 5th years and roll with the young guys? I would hate to lose the young guys for guys that didn't get it done this year.
I would not be okay with that. because you're number one, you're stripping your linebacker room. I mean, you cut so if you don't bring back Kaiser and you don't bring back Bertrand, why would you not bring those guys back? I'm not saying that you bring them back to start, but you do bring them back, and you have all of those guys compete for starting linebacker positions. And I think you make it very clear to those two that, like, look, fellas, we want you back. You are an important part of this team, that, with their leadership qualities and all of those things. But you say, your starting position isn't necessarily in the bag. You're going to have to compete for it. You're going to have to compete for snaps. But I would absolutely bring those guys back. There's too much of a gap between those guys and the young guys right now. There's just too much. You need all of those guys there.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, you would lose all of your experience basically, right, and you'd have a couple guys who have shown some potential, but still have a lot of growth to do themselves. And then you'd have a ton of inexperience behind them as well. You would have, sometimes experience can be overrated, but at the same time, just what you said, make them compete for jobs, which is what everyone should have to do in any given year. And I don't think there's been, anything about the Marcus Freeman way, I guess you'd say, that has said that, that it's not a meritocracy, that you're not going to make guys go out there and compete day in and day out. That's pretty much been it. I mean, that's part of why some of these young, guys like Jalen Sneed and Prince Colley, why, like, by the time they get on the field, they have taken hundreds of reps in practice and they have gotten better to that point, right? So it's not like they were that guy all along, and then it's like, well, why did it take this long to get them on the field? Well, they had to grow to get to that point, and that's part of it. I think so. I think it'd be very dangerous just to tell your most experienced guys not to come back next year and just completely roll the dice on a ton of upside that's unproven.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And look, there's a ton of talent there. There's a ton of talent and there's a ton of possibility. And I want those guys on the field, but you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I mean, you have to keep some continuity. You have to keep some leadership in that room too, because none of those guys have established themselves as leaders either, right? And that's
part of it too. Those other guys are
college football. I mean, it's just
part of your leadership. Yeah, especially Bertrand. And that's like when Al Golden was talked in the middle of the season about JD Bertrand being criticized. The first thing he talked about was his leadership. It wasn't necessarily purely playing ability that he started talking about. It was the leadership that JD Bertrand brings, and you need that as well. Especially if you do want to hold things together. If you have some tough times. Shannon asks, with the regular season now over, do you like the coaching staff's utilization of Xavier Watts on defense, or would you prefer to see him at wide receiver?
I would not be surprised to see him starting at safety next year, to be perfectly honest with you. I think he came on big towards the end of the year. I think he has the most raw talent of anybody back there right now. And honestly, that includes Brandon Joseph at the moment. I think that he could be really, really good at safety if he's just allowed to focus on safety. And that's been the biggest issue with Xavier Watts, is he hasn't been allowed to focus on one position, and they did the little experiment moving him over to wide receiver, and then they decided that wasn't going to happen, and they moved him back to, it's like, come on, guys. Like, so now the second half of the season, he focused on safety, and surprise, surprise, he became one of their most confident safeties, in my opinion, one of the most trusted guys back there. And so at the moment, as we are talking right now, I want to keep him at safety. Okay. If you're talking to me a couple of years ago, I wanted him at wide receiver. I think he's a playmaker. I wanted to see the ball in his hands. I was excited about it. But at this point in his career, keep the man at safety. He has a chance to start there and be really good.
Wide receiver thing is done. We're never going to see Xavier Watts.
Yep.
I can't foresee Xavier Watts going back to wide receiver again. And they might not have the high-end guys like Kyle Hamilton and Brandon Joseph at safety, but I think overall the safety position is just going to continue to get better over the next. Now there will be some higher-end guys potentially coming in here over the next couple of years, but I'm talking about in the interim, just like right now, I think you can feel pretty good with Xavier Watts back there, and I think you're right. He's probably, at the very least going to be in contention to be a starter. And with Brandon Joseph potentially leaving, now he hasn't officially made his decision yet, but assuming that Brandon Joseph is going to be gone, I think you're right. Xavier Watts is probably going to be a starter back there next year. And even if he's not, he's going to be in the rotation. We're going to see him quite a bit.
Yeah, he's going to play a lot, I think. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And he's done really well. You're absolutely right. Now with a full off season where you do nothing but be safety, I think the sky's really the limit for him. Well, I think we'll save this for the Cam Hart rapid fire discussion as well.
Nice. Okay. Fair enough.
Who's going to start at nickel next year is the question Josh has.
Because that's a fun one. Because
kind of had it in my mind.
Yeah. It's speculation on our part because you just never know what they're going to do with some different guys, and we'll get into it. But yeah, kind of excited about that.
Yeah. Dropping dimes. Why do some teams go on a clap to snap it? Some verbal. Are there advantages or just preference?
In my opinion, it's just preference. I'm not a big fan of the clap, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. I know that there's a lot of teams that go with it. Notre Dame, obviously, is one of those teams that, but I don't think they go with it all the time, right? So there's a lot of, some people go with the leg, some people go with the clap, some people go with the cadence. It's all personal preference. And a lot of it also has to do with where you're playing your game. Are you on the road in a loud, hostile environment where you're not going to hear a clap? Are you going to go off of, there were times where they did that, where Josh Lugg would put his arm out, right? And that meant they were about to snap the ball, because they couldn't hear the clap or the cadence, right? So there's different things that you can do. It's all, in my opinion, it's all about preference. I mean, I know that there's probably some OCs out there that live and die with whatever they want it to be. Okay, that's funny, Derek. But it's 100% personal preference. Jimmy Dugan said, "Avoid the clap." By the way,
avoid the clap. That's right.
Thanks. Avoid the clap, Jimmy Dugan.
Ian, is making Mickens an assistant defensive coordinator a good idea to keep him and make him a DC in training?
Number one, I don't think Mickens is going anywhere. Now, watch, he'll leave tomorrow. But I don't think he's going to go anywhere. I think he has a really good relationship with Marcus Freeman. I think Marcus Freeman gives him a lot of responsibility. Not only recruiting the corners, but coaching the corners. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me that he's allowed to do whatever he wants at corner based on who played this year, right? And a lot of those decisions were made properly. Let's be honest. And I just don't see him leaving. And maybe he is quietly the defensive coordinator in waiting. Maybe, I don't know the answer to that. Maybe he has no desire to be a defensive coordinator. I don't know Coach Mickens enough. If he came into the office and said, "I'm leaving unless you make me an assistant defensive coordinator," okay, then you have that conversation. But again, it's a title. I don't think it's a change in responsibility. So is that something that he wants? I have no idea, but I don't think he's leaving anytime soon. I think he enjoys where he's at.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Elston basically had a million different titles along the line for all the years that he was here. And, I mean, it kept him around for a long time, but ultimately gone. Let me ask you this one, Vince. I think this came up when Jesse and I were on last night. I think someone asked about the prospect of Marcus Freeman getting back and being more involved with the linebackers on a day-to-day basis. What are your thoughts on that? Because he does, he's got a defensive background. He was a linebacker.
Sure.
He was a linebackers coach.
Sure.
What do you think about that?
Looking at it, let's say I was the athletic director and Marcus came to me and said, "Hey, Jack, I'm looking at getting back into, I want to be more hands-on with the linebackers," right? My comment to him would be, then what are we paying Al Golden for? He's your linebackers coach, right? So I personally don't like the head coach coaching a position. Now, I also know that Nick Saban coached the corners at Alabama.
Right.
And Brian Kelly pretty much coached the quarterbacks at Notre Dame, right? For whatever you want to take.
Good, bad, and different. Yeah,
right. Exactly. But there are head coaches that have their hands dirty, right?
Like Lincoln Riley is calling plays on the offense for USC.
Yeah.
He's not a position coach,
caller,
but he's a play caller.
Right. As a play caller. Sure.
Yeah.
The way I like my head coach to be is I want my head coach to be a CEO of it. I want I want him to be over. I don't want him dealing with the nuts and the bolts, because I just feel like if he's super nuts and bolts with the linebackers, is he really paying attention to what happens with the offense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I feel like that could fall by the wayside a little bit, a la Brian Kelly in the offense when Brian Van Gorder was doing the defense, right? He was just like, hey, do it. And that didn't work out too well. Now, I realize that's a drastic comparison, but I just want my head coach to be equal parts on both sides of the ball. And you can give, suggestions and all of those different things, because you should as the head coach. But I personally would like that. It can work. I just wouldn't like it.
And I get what you're saying. I think it would be tough considering you brought, I think I said this yesterday. You brought this guy in. He's got decades of experience, the guy running your defense right now, including NFL experience.
In the Super Bowl, coaching linebackers.
Yeah, exactly. He coached linebackers. And so you obviously entrusted him to this position. And then to jump in,
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think it would be, if it has to be done, it has to be done. The bigger, because I agree to an extent with what you're talking about. You want the head coach to be able to be involved in all facets, and especially as involved in recruiting as he is. He's got a ton of stuff on his plate.
Yes, he does
already. But I also think that there's something to a young head coach, like if that's your specialty, at least being involved, like with the what? At least being involved with the position that is the specialty. I hadn't noticed that, but I guess I wasn't here before. So all the sex appeal staring at you. I mean,
there it
Vince
is.
just put this comment up from Derek.
You couldn't help it.
Go to your grandma's 99th birthday party, Derek. Come on. Kidding. Stay here. Just completely ignore your grandma's 99th birthday party. I mean, it's only going to come around once.
Great.
Who are you going to be rooting for, Georgia or LSU? I mean, this is like no-brainer, right?
Come on.
And do you even need to root one way or the other?
Yeah. I'm hoping for an epic beatdown, not just rooting for. Like, I want Georgia to go in there and just humiliate LSU. I mean, is that wrong? Is that petty? Yeah, it's petty. It's okay. I'm petty. I want them to be humiliated, because if they get humiliated, there's an outside chance that they could match up with Notre Dame. That'd be great. I'm all for it. So go Dogs.
Foregone conclusion. I think we all, maybe not you, but most of us, had in the back of our mind, oh, what if LSU does run the table and they beat Georgia? What if they pull this whole thing off? But then after just seeing them just getting curb stomped by Texas A&M last week, I don't think anyone really sees that happening now. So
no, I don't. I just don't think there's a snowball's chance in them winning this game on Saturday. Now watch them go out and win by 3 touchdowns.
I know.
I know. But I just, from an analyst's standpoint, they just don't match up. I mean, they just don't. So, and that's what, as Brian always says, football's all about the matchups. LSU does not match up with Georgia right now.
That's true.
Not many teams do, by the way. They don't match up with Georgia.
Not at all. Coleman, what's the percentage you both think Brandon Joseph will be back next year? Let's go 1 to 10 on this. 1 being the lowest that he's coming back, 10 being the highest. What do you think?
I will give it a 2, saying that there's still a chance. Like, I'm giving that 1-2 chance, right? But to me, I felt like Brandon Joseph was using Notre Dame as a 1-year, make a name for myself, get out of Dodge kind of situation. I'm not sure that he ever 100% bought in. And based on his play, it just felt like he was done. Especially in the USC game, the one play where he comes down to make a tackle, and it clearly looked like he made a business decision that I'm not making the tackle here. It just doesn't feel like he's bought in, like he's thinking about coming back for another year.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming him for doing that. If I am a former All-American and I'm at Northwestern, the writing's on the wall.
The guy could have opted out to begin with, because he started getting dinged up. He
true.
had, kept him out of a couple games. He could have easily just said, I'm not going to play against USC.
And I don't blame him coming to Notre Dame for a year either. I
No.
don't, because it's going to raise your profile immediately as soon as you walk in
Exactly.
the door. I have no problem with that. It just doesn't feel like he's going to stick around. I don't know. I don't have any intel. Just doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. I think I'm in about the same. I'd put it at around a 2. You know, like if being a first round draft pick is his priority, which he said it was when he came in the door 11 months ago, then he should come back for another year to work on, to work toward becoming a first round draft pick. But he thought that he was going to do that in the 11 months that he was here, and he's just not there. He's still he's gonna play in the NFL. He's gonna have a job, but in terms of first round draft pick, that's not what he is right now. Yeah. Still a really good safety, just not quite at that spot.
Mm-hmm.
We'll save that super chat for rapid fire as well.
Works for me.
But let me see what we've got here. Michael, who would you like to see become the next big star at Notre Dame? One on offense and one on defense. Can't be Ben Morrison.
Ooh, that's mean. All right.
I think Ben Morrison is bordering on already being a big star right now.
Seriously, that's a good point. How about I'm going to go with, I think Prince Collie has a chance, or Jalen Sneed. I think they have a good chance on defense of being some pretty studly dudes, and like Notre Dame needs that stud linebacker, right? And I think that could be a lot of fun. Offensively, I can't pick a lineman because they're not going to be a big star. Like they're going to be big to us, but they're not going to be nationally a big star. So you got to go with a skill position. Of course, I'd love to say a quarterback, but I am not going out on that limb. So I'm going to go with Tobias Merriweather. I think he has an opportunity to be really, really good if they can find somebody to get him the ball consistently.
That was my immediate reaction to the offense. I think he's got it there. But I think that he's definitely got all the skills to become the next big star at Notre Dame. The only question is what you just said. Do they have the guy to get him the ball? Sneed would be my answer on defense. If you could have a linebacker with that quick twitch, can cover a lot of ground and do some of those things, more like in the Jalen Smith, Owusu Koromoa mold, kind of a cross between those two, I guess, a little bit, but more twitchier, like those guys than like your Bertrands and Schmitz and those kind
for
of
sure.
guys,
Yeah.
Let me see. Well, I think I'm looking. I'll tell you what. We'll finish with this one.
Oh, what do we got?
If Michael Mayer doesn't win the John Mackey Award, what will your reaction be?
It'll be typical that these awards are super political and that people voting have no idea what they're doing with their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the best tight end in college football.
The Biletnikoff Award is for a wide receiver to begin with, but when you look at the stats that he has compared to the guy from Georgia, it's like, what are we even doing here? That Michael Mayer is not on this list and the other guy is, when Michael Mayer has been so much of the passing game for Notre Dame this season. He's been practically all of it this season, and you don't put him on that award. So I think reputation is kind of carrying the day with some of these awards when it comes to the tight ends. And I don't know how Michael Mayer's reputation wasn't already higher. I mean, all he's done is produce since he stepped on the field as a freshman.
I mean, he got screwed last year by not being even a Mackey Award finalist last year, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no words for that last year, let alone if he doesn't win it this year, to be honest with you. So, yeah.
David wants to know, if Joseph doesn't return, losing Griffith and Brown as well, do you guys believe Coach O'Leary has to prove his coaching development chops in the spring?
No, I don't believe that, because he's done a pretty good job with Xavier Watts when he's had him full time.
Yeah, I think he's already there.
Yeah, I think he's doing just fine. He's coached elite talent. He coached, Hamilton, obviously. I think he coached him up, to be honest. And there's something to be said for taking a really good player, coaching him up, and then taking guys and developing them. There's a lot going on there, right? And I think he's going to have a lot of young talent next year coming in. So I mean, we're going to learn a lot about O'Leary, but I think he's proven himself just fine. I don't have any issues with Coach O'Leary right now. I think he's doing just fine.
No, I think so as well. I think he's, like we were talking about Xavier Watts earlier, and the fact that Watts is where he is, one in part to his skill, but two, due in part to what O'Leary brings. I think he's coached that position really well so far.
Right.
I can't see any fault in what he's done with that group.
And you've got to give him credit for the production that these guys have had. Now, he can also get dinged for missed tackles and some things like absolutely. I mean, if you're going to get the praise, you got to get but I think
that's a
overall,
defensive wide thing too. The linebackers are just as guilty, and the defensive coordinator is coaching the linebackers. So
and you can't coach Hart, and I don't mean H-A-R-T, I mean H-E-A-R-T, right? And Hart had a lot to do with some of those missed tackles in the last game, in my opinion, from the safeties. So again, he took a wide receiver and turned him into what I think is a starting caliber safety. Who else are you going to give credit to for that?
Yeah, I concur. All right, Vince, are you ready for it?
I'm always ready for rapid fire, baby.
Rapid fire time. Here we go. All right, we'll include if your stuff is good enough, we'll work it into rapid fire as well. We've got some stuff on deck. We're not going to neglect it. You can still shoot questions in. But here we go. How differently does an 8-4 season feel under Marcus Freeman compared to 8-4 if Brian Kelly was still here?
Completely different. Completely different. If Brian Kelly was here, Notre Dame goes 8-4 with the exact same losses that Marcus Freeman had, we would be skewering Brian Kelly. We would be hanging him in effigy.
People would be ready to fire him. Yes.
We would light his carcass on fire. I mean, it would be chaos, frankly. And 8-4 under Marcus Freeman, while it is a disappointment, and nobody can change my mind about that, is a disappointment. Okay. You can still.
Is somebody trying to change your mind about that? Like,
yes and no. Brian and I had a nice debate about it. Well, okay. I take it back. We had a debate about whether 9-3 would have been a disappointment if they would have beaten USC. I said it was still disappointing because I said the floor would have been 10-2 going into the season, and they were 9-3. Now, the way they finished, et cetera, but they're 8-4, and that's a disappointment, no doubt. But there's a lot of positives you can take from it, recruiting being one of them, because if Brian Kelly was still the head coach, I don't think they have the same recruiting class that they have right now for the 23 class that they're going to sign here in 3 weeks. I think it's completely different. So you've got a lot of positives coming out of this season, while it is still a disappointment. If it was Brian Kelly, this is year 13, and he goes 8-4 with the roster that he had, no, man, you're calling for his job at that point. So it's a completely different feeling.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, I didn't see Tommy Gunn's question. I'm just going to point the finger at Vince. He's the one in charge of finding the questions for us. So I didn't see any Tommy Gunn's questions. He said we skipped over his question. But
we might have.
Yeah, to this question about Free versus Kelly, we were coming off the 5 straight seasons of double-digit wins in the college football playoff appearances, just missing out on the playoff, 11-1 in the regular season and just missing out on the playoff last year. So if you had gone from that with bringing back what they brought back, really the biggest question being the quarterback, and then all of a sudden, again, love Brian Kelly or hate him, he had won all these games against the unranked teams, right? Mm-hmm. And so if all of a sudden Brian Kelly loses twice to unranked teams at home, and specifically these unranked teams, Marshall and Stanford, you're in full panic mode. But at least with Marcus Freeman, you can, I'm not saying you're going to completely disregard it because, I don't think we can completely put it in our past, but we can at least say he's grown from there. Since that Stanford game, we did see a different team. And even though they lost to USC, that was obviously still a top 5 USC team. I mean, they had to play 3 top 5 teams this season, and they managed to beat one of them.
Yeah.
Sure. So, and that was part of that stretch that came after Stanford. So you can write some things off to growing pains of a first-year head coach because you knew there had to be some growing pains for him. You just didn't know to what extent So again, if it's Brian Kelly, you're in panic mode. The program is going backwards. It's backsliding and all these things. Where with Marcus Freeman, you've got, well, okay, 8-4 still isn't what we wanted, but there were some good things that happened in there. We have still finished. I think, as you said the other day, you're on an upward trajectory still for Marcus Freeman, even with that loss to USC. You got to take care of the bowl game now, but it just feels with everything that he's still doing. The recruiting class is ranked number 2 in the nation right now. So with all these things, you're still taking care of business with the recruits. So it just feels it's a night and day different feel because of everything.
Absolutely. Huge difference. Difference, because we don't have the optimism going into the offseason if this is a Brian Kelly coach team. We just don't. I mean, it would be a top 15 recruiting class, give or take, and it would be.
Has he become complacent?
Yeah.
Is Notre Dame about to, again, is Notre Dame about to backslide? Those kind of things would be what
absolutely.
and
about. Justifiably so, by the way. All of those comments would have been justifiable.
Yeah. And I mean, just think about, because there were already people who were disgruntled with Brian Kelly.
Right.
And again, some of it justifiably so. And so those people would have been even more vocal if this had been an 8-4 season under Kelly compared
myself
to
included. I mean, I'd have been leading the charge. I
know you would have.
Yeah.
All right. Scale of 1 to 10. Rate the importance of Cam Hart coming back for his 5th year at Notre Dame.
I think it's like a 9. I mean, I'm still a big Cam Hart fan. I think he was undervalued by a lot of Notre Dame fans this year because he just wasn't thrown at a whole lot. He just wasn't. And from my understanding, I mean, one of the reasons, he's coming back is, number one, he got injured at the end of the season. That's not a way that you want to go out, and especially going into a combine and, all of that different stuff. So I get that part of it. But from what I understand, he's also excited to come back because of the research of the rise of Benjamin Morrison, because he thinks guys are going to try and throw at him more. So he's going to have an opportunity to show them what he's got. I think you're going to have arguably one of the top 1-2 corners in the country next year. I really do.
I do too.
And I think that there's no value you could put to that. I mean, that's invaluable. I mean, that's something that you absolutely want to have. And I can't remember the last time that Notre Dame really actually had that. So I think it's huge.
I do as well. I'd put it at a 9 as well, because you've got your 2 starters back. Basically, you're losing Tariq Bracy, who, as you said, was probably their best guy game in and game out this year. And to think about where Tariq Bracy came from early in his career to where he is, plus, assuming you're getting Clarence Lewis back, you've got 3, and you've still got young studs coming in the program. But to have the high end guys with all the experience with Morrison and Hart both coming back, we're probably going to see some guys who were on the roster this year get to step in, into some other roles. And like the question came up earlier with the nickel, and like, who's going to be the nickel now with Tariq Bracy gone? I mean, that's going to be one of the questions for the offseason. I would have to think that Jaden Mickey probably, is going to have kind of the first crack to show whether he can handle that or not. We saw him there at points this year. So I would think that he'll kind of be at the top of the list, but I think that with the spring, there'll probably be pretty much an open audition there to see what guys can do.
Yeah, I think he's a leader in the clubhouse, to be honest with you, if we're talking about nickel. And some people are saying that he's playing out of position there, and that may be, and that's because he was playing outside corner all spring, and then they moved him there in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Now he's going to have more of an opportunity to practice there and be there, be the guy, be the man at that spot. And I think he'd be really good there once he gets comfortable in that spot. So, I mean, you're telling me that you're going to have Cam Hart, Benjamin Morrison, and Jaden Mickey as your 3 corners. I'm okay with that. You can roll with that. And then if you've got Xavier Watts and somebody else at safety, whether it's Peyton Bowen as a true freshman, I don't know how I feel about that yet. I need to see the man play against some college competition, but he's looking awfully good against high school kids. Yeah. That's for sure. So you're going to have we're not going to have questions about the secondary going into the fall. It may be like who plays here, who plays there, that kind of thing.
Right.
But as a whole, as a confidence level thing, the secondary is going to be where it's at.
Yeah, I concur. All right, fill in the blank, Vince. In the last 3 weeks, I've talked to a Clemson reporter on one side of the country and a USC reporter on the other side of the country. And it's blank that both of those guys have the strong opinion that Notre Dame is destined to join the Big Ten in the near future.
It is obvious that they have no idea how Notre Dame operates because I just do not see that being the case. And you and I have talked about it a bunch. They're on the outside looking in.
And I could probably throw a Syracuse guy in there as well when I talk to the Syracuse guy. Everybody is under the impression that Notre Dame is just going to run to the Big Ten.
Yeah, you could throw everybody into that that's not a Notre Dame person because they don't understand. They're part of it. They cover a team that's part of a conference, and they don't know what it's like to be an independent. They just don't get it. What do you mean? You got to be part of a conference. I don't know how. And if Notre Dame joins a conference, they think that it's obvious that they'll go to the Big Ten. Again, number one, Notre Dame's not joining a conference. Number two, if they did join a conference, they have to join the ACC. They don't have a choice right now under contract. They're under contract with the ACC. Number three, the expansion of the college football playoff pretty much guarantees that Notre Dame is not going to be joining a conference anytime soon, period. Unless they make a rule that you have to be a conference champion to be in the college football playoff, there is no chance Notre Dame is joining a conference anytime soon.
Yeah. And as Michael says, they all think that it is the Big Ten because of the $100 million payout.
They're all blinded by the money.
It is more than just about the $100 million. Now, Notre Dame, like everybody else, they value the dollar as well, but they also value their independence. And as I have tried to explain to all of these guys, just what you started with. One, the fact that the college football playoff is going to expand from 4 to 12 was the first huge step for Notre Dame because it guarantees more future access to the college football playoff, more spots in the playoff, more opportunity for Notre Dame. So they don't have to worry, like they would have been like last week's game against USC would have had 10 times more meaning. Like USC pretty much would have had a spot locked up in the playoff going into last week. Notre Dame would have been playing to get into the top 12 if the playoff field had been 12 this year. So like there's that is number one. Now the TV contract is the next thing that has to be figured out. Now, are they going to get $100 million like the teams from the SEC and the Big Ten? Probably not. But they're probably also going to get more than the 15 to 20 million that they're getting from NBC right now. They're going to get a lot more. The question is, how close to that 100 million can they get? And, again, I think we've talked about this before. I don't think they necessarily have to be pushing even in that 80 to 90 million dollar range because their athletic department is not as big as the Ohio States and Oklahomas and these other state schools.
They're not as dependent on that.
That's right.
Check
Their budget isn't the same as those other schools. But the next question is, do they get the TV contract? And as long as they have a TV contract for the home games that gets them what they consider the right amount of money that makes it worth it for them to stay independent, they're going to stay independent. There's just no question about that. And as you said, they also have this contract with the ACC that they would have to buy their way out of and, switch over all the, the other teams in the, the Olympic sports from the ACC to the Big Ten. So I've really just kind of found it very curious that all these people seem to think that. I will say this. Next week, I'm not going to say the name of the reporter, but I have an interview scheduled for early next week with a nationally prominent sports media reporter. And we're going to talk a lot about the Notre Dame NBC contract, the future, what's going on in the booth right now, a lot of those different things. So if anyone has those kind of questions, I'll probably bring up Herb Street and Fowler for that matter. So if anyone has questions for the sports media guy next week, you can throw those at us as well. And I'll see if I can work those in. But
nice.
I mean, I don't think that it is anything to worry about right now because, again, the first step is already there, the expansion of the playoff. The question now is you've got a couple years left on this NBC contract. What's the next contract going to look like?
Yeah.
As long as they still
That's
have
important.
a TV partner that pays them what they consider, the reasonable right amount of money, they're going to be fine. The Big Ten is not going to happen.
Like, they're not going to get what they're getting now from NBC because that's chump change. Like, that's not going to happen. They will be able to make a better deal, whether it's with Fox, CBS, NBC, whoever it happens to be. They're going to be able to make a deal with somebody. They're just not as beholden to that check as other people. Like you said, it's just they have options because of that, right? Their other sports make money, and it's smaller and all of those different things. And they don't need to make rash decisions just based on a paycheck like UCLA and USC, for example, or just can't wait to get to the Big Ten because of that huge payout that they're about to get. So it's going to be, it is 100% going to be interesting to see where Notre Dame goes and which TV partner that they end up having, because I think that is intriguing, to be honest with you. Because I don't know how happy they are with NBC, right? And I know none of the people in the chat are happy with them. But I think that's going to be intriguing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, leave NBC. They really don't value the Notre Dame brand. I found it, when the women's basketball team played Cal in St. Louis a couple weeks ago. Do you remember that? That was the first women's basketball game televised on NBC.
Yeah.
And it's like,
interesting.
How much of that was, like NBC trying to keep Notre Dame happy, that kind of stuff. So it's going to be. Yeah. And somebody asked if it was Mike Tirico. No, it is not Mike Tirico. It is not someone who actively works like on this side of a microphone in the media or broadcast games. It is someone who covers sports media, who kind of has all the contacts for the ins and outs and, those kind of things. And will have a lot of opinions about sports media. So, which I'm looking forward to more than just talking to someone,
right.
To talk to someone kind of thing. Okay. Tennessee and Alabama, both 10-2, Vince. Mm-hmm. Despite Tennessee's head-to-head win over Alabama, college football playoff rankings have the Tide number 6, the Volunteers at number 7 this week. College football playoff chair Boo Corrigan says it's due to Alabama's, quote, full body of work, end quote. Do you buy or sell a team with the same record and a head-to-head loss being ranked ahead of the team that beat them?
It is tough because I know that the College Football Playoff Committee values Alabama over pretty much anybody, if we're being honest. And I almost wasn't going to be surprised if they had Alabama at 5 and Ohio State at 6. You know what I mean? Because that would just not surprise me in any way. And, they said that it's about the body of work. When you look at Alabama's schedule and who they beat and, all of that, they beat a head coachless Auburn. They did beat Ole Miss, which Brian would say is not a good win. I get that. They lost to LSU. Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah.
The rest of their wins, they beat Texas A&M by 4. They blew out Arkansas that everybody thought was going to be good, but they're not. They blew out Vanderbilt. Okay. Their wins aren't really all that good. And if you want to say that Texas is their best win and they won by a point, is that really that good of a win?
And the loss to LSU looks worse now because LSU now is a 3-loss team, and they just lost to Texas A&M for that matter.
Good call. And
here's the only justification I can see, and I didn't see the whole context of what Boo Corrigan said, but again, I saw that he said it's due to the body of work. Hendon Hooker is out for Tennessee, so I do think that's a factor.
Yeah.
The fact that Tennessee got their doors blown off by South Carolina a couple of weeks ago. They bounced back and easily took care of Vanderbilt, but with no Hendon Hooker, they are definitely a different team right now than the team that beat both Alabama and LSU. So
that makes sense.
That would be my only rationalization. Otherwise, I completely agree with what you're saying. But because of the fact that they don't have a guy who was once a Heisman candidate, then that I would have to weigh that into consideration. And I know like the NCAA tournament has weighed injuries and stuff like that
Sure.
before as factors. So
Right.
it's a major
That's a good point. I didn't even think
player.
about that. And I think that honestly, with all things being considered, I might put them behind. But again, in the grand scheme of things, having them having one at 6, one at 7, does that make a difference? You know what I mean? It might make a difference in what bowl you go to, but the SEC pools all their bowl money and they hand it out evenly. So, I think it's splitting hairs at this point. But yeah, I would put Alabama above just because Tennessee doesn't have their quarterback. I think that's legit.
Right. All right. A couple from the chat queue here. Chase wants to know what we think of the news out of the Rose Bowl saying they might pick Penn State and changing Notre Dame's bowl game.
I don't understand how Penn State going. Number one, why would they take Penn State? Because the next highest ranked Big Ten team goes to the Rose Bowl. That's Ohio State.
Ohio State, exactly.
Ohio State is nowhere near Penn State in the rankings. I think Penn State's like 10, if I remember correctly. So I don't know why they would take Penn State. That's not how they do the contract. That's not how it works. They take the next highest ranked team. That's Ohio State. Also, I'm just not sure how that affects Notre Dame's bowl situation. Can you explain that to me, or do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know how all that trickles down, but I did see someone projecting today the ReliaQuest Bowl, which used to be the Outback Bowl in Tampa, as a potential landing spot for Notre Dame now, which earlier in the week, it was pretty much Cheez-It, Gator, Holiday were the three. And so now I am seeing ReliaQuest. So I don't know if this has something to do with that or not.
Well, and again, it all depends on the order that these bowls get to pick the teams, right? The Gator Bowl is the ACC versus the SEC. So I just don't understand, again, how the Big Ten comes into play with that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm missing something.
Greg says because Ohio State was just there. I mean,
so
like
what?
in the old day, it's like the Rose Bowl is clinging to tradition. Like they're trying to keep their spot in this hierarchy with the expansion of the college football playoff. They're going to be lucky if they're still operating in a couple of years because they think they have leverage that they don't have, for one thing. So what? Ohio State was just there. Ohio State brings a lot of people to the Rose Bowl. That's all that matters, and all that matters to them is they get to kick off at 5:00 Eastern time and get their sunset. So they really don't seem to care who's playing in the game from year to year.
Right.
So they get the parade and they get their sunset.
Right. The bottom line is they take the next highest ranked Big Ten team. That's Ohio State. I don't understand what I hate to say it, but it sounds like clickbait to me.
Yeah.
That's what that sounds like.
We got people saying Ohio State won't go because they can't sell all their tickets. I don't know.
And Penn State's going to travel better than Ohio State? Is that like...
I don't know. I mean, it's obviously been longer since Penn State has been there, but I don't know if that matters or not. All right, Tommy Guns threw the question out. What's your ideal usage for Edwards next year? He says he can see him being the gadget guy. Something like Curtis Samuel, Braxton Miller role after he switched from quarterback.
Sure. I mean, right now the gadget guy should be Chris Tyree. So
yeah.
Dylan Edwards can be the backup to Chris Tyree. There you go. That's how I see them using Edwards as a Chris Tyree type. But you've got Chris Tyree still, and I think he's better than Edwards. And so I'm still using Chris Tyree.
Yeah, it's frustrating just seeing these athletes not being utilized already, especially when they're upperclassmen who are not being utilized to their full potential. You can throw Braden Lindsey in there as well. And, we were pounding the table for Chris Tyree, and then we finally saw Chris Tyree, and lo and behold, he has a great, day against Cal and kind of great couple of games, and then all of a sudden he sort of falls into the into the background once again. I mean, Chris Tyree is a great athlete, just waiting to be used. So that's who I would go with first. But I could see that down the road for a guy like Edwards as well.
Yeah.
Craig with a super chat. Thank you, Craig. Any idea who we're playing in the bowl game and where we might play in the bowl game? Well, I guess we just kind of touched on that.
We did.
South Carolina is a name that comes up over and over again. South Carolina, or take your pick of other SEC schools. Ole Miss, Mississippi State, they've all kind of been floated out there.
I think that's accurate. I still think Notre Dame's going to go to the Gator Bowl because the way I understand it is the Cheez-It Bowl has first pick. They're going to pick Florida State. And the Gator Bowl has second pick. They're going to pick Notre Dame. And that's who they're going to have. And then it's going to be South Carolina, Ole Miss, or who was the third one? Mississippi State, I think I saw as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and LSU, there's an outside chance that they could play LSU as well. But as far as where Notre Dame is going to end up, I still think they're going to end up in the Gator Bowl.
Yeah. That's what I think as of right now, because there's not like as much wiggle room in any of this bowl selection as there used to be, because there are all these tie-ins. The only real wiggle room is Notre Dame gets a spot, with one of the ACC's bowl games and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. And somebody asked if they have a chance of playing Oregon. The only chance they have of playing Oregon is if they go to the Holiday Bowl in San Diego, because that is an ACC versus Pac-12 game.
Correct.
So if I'm being honest, I don't know where the Holiday Bowl lands as far as order for the Pac-12, but that would be I think the only opportunity that they have to play a Pac-12 team off the top of my head. I am not an expert at the bowl tie-ins.
Yeah, like who goes where if this happens and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's a domino effect. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's absolutely a domino effect. So, we'll see what happens.
Right. Mike wants to know which position group will make the biggest jump in 2023.
Hopefully it's quarterback.
That and wide receiver.
Yeah.
I
think quarterback will affect wide receiver, but
and the problem is, as of right now, there are potentially a lot of new faces that we don't even know who they're going to be yet. So it's hard to actually make that prediction. Like, are they going to take a grad transfer quarterback? Are they going to take a grad transfer wide receiver or two? And how are some of these other guys? I mean, those are the two that really need to get better. The question is, will they?
Right. Absolutely. If it's which one do I want to get better? It's the quarterback position.
Milton asks the $1 million question. Why do you guys suspect Tommy Rees doesn't do more 21 personnel? Seems like a no-brainer considering
all you, buddy.
The success rate. I wish I knew. Now, we did see more of it the last couple of weeks, but they didn't always do successful things at it. Like we saw, whether it was 21 or 31, we saw the pass plays a couple of weeks ago, against Boston College that were huge. I have no idea why they don't do more, because as I have said over and over and over again this season, like we were just talking about, the wide receiver position is a position that needs to get better. The quarterback needed the kind of pass plays that were just easy little layups that he could hit whenever he needed to. The screen passes up and down at times, but like when he was throwing to running backs down the seam a little bit, whether they were short or intermediate, whatever they happen to be, some wheel routes and stuff like that, he was able to hit those pretty easily. And because the running back position was so much stronger overall than the wide receiver position, to me, it was inconceivable that we didn't see more of it throughout the season as more of a staple, even like 30% of the time, as opposed to probably 10% of the time that we probably saw them, because all three of those guys can catch the ball. All three of those guys have nice hands, and they play off each other. So what, and that's like against USC. Yeah, they threw the running backs the ball a little bit more, but I always felt like they were more productive when they had multiple backs on the field, like when they, do a little fake to one and then, here to the other side. Now we'll throw it to this guy or we'll hand it to this guy going the other way, using the running backs to both manipulate the box and to counter each other. Why they didn't do more, I have no idea, because to me, the running back position was far and away the best position group on the field for the offense. Well, I won't say far and away because the offensive line was good as well, but
right, but they're not skill position. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, you can't just run 100% 21 personnel. But
no, and again, I'm not saying that.
Right, no, I'm not saying you are.
But you can take advantage of so many mismatches with linebackers when you're mixing them in and out.
I agree. The percentage that they used 21 personnel was way lower than it needed to be. Way lower. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly that from a matchup standpoint, there's so many mismatches in favor of Notre Dame when they're in 21, and that will continue to be the case moving into next season. So, and probably the season after that as well, because the running back room is going to be stacked for a few more years at least. So they need to utilize it more off 21, 31, the whole nine. That needs to be what
Milton is asking, can we speculate why? I honestly have no idea why. Do you? Mm-hmm. Like the why?
I don't.
There is no why to me, because I think just like what you think, Milton, I think the exact same way. I mean, Vince, I know, is tired of hearing me talk about more 21, but
no.
But almost every time they do something out of 21, it's successful, and so why they didn't use it more, considering the deficiencies they had, I don't know. It makes no sense to me.
Yep.
The only thing I could see is, I think Diggs was a little bit dinged up from time to time. Maybe that affected, their preparation. Did they want to risk having two backs on the field at the, because that was the kind of stuff that we heard with Brian Kelly, is like, because we had seen some two back stuff over the years, but because of just, again, like either mostly minor injuries at the running back positions, I think they didn't want to risk having those guys on the field at the same time and risk another guy getting hurt so that you're down numbers. I
guess, yeah.
But Tommy Rees himself has said, when you've got Chris Tyree on the field with one of those other two guys, the options are virtually limitless.
That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And again, that's how you get Chris Tyree more involved in the offense next year or in the bowl game or whatever, is just have him out there with another running back, because you can move him all over the place. And just, and again, like that run on 3rd and 2 on the very first series that Diggs had, in my world, that would have been Chris Tyree running the football. That was one of the few times that 21 was not successful. So I don't know. We Are Not Marshall wants to know what the offseason looks like, covering men's basketball, lacrosse. I'm doing play-by-play for women, so I've got a lot of that going on. Throwing in some coverage of the men from time to time. You're going to the Michigan State game tonight, right?
I am. As soon as we're done here, I'm going to eat a little dinner and make my way over to campus and head to the game. I'm going to go to 5 or 6 games this season. Kind of looked at the calendar and figured out which games I could go to, and I'm going to try to go and have a little bit more firsthand knowledge of the men's team. That way you and I can talk more intelligently about it. And I'm going to try to make it to a few women's games as well. My daughters really want to go see the women play, which is awesome. So we're going to go do that. And, that's pretty much the off season. It's going to be basketball, and then high school sports as well for me. So that's my off season. And then you get into the spring. And of course, we're going to follow the baseball team, because Sean and I are huge baseball nuts, and want to see what it's like with a brand new head coach and everything that's going to be happening in Notre Dame baseball. That's exciting all by itself. So yeah, we're definitely going to baseball. And then of course, spring football. Hello.
By the way, I saw that. Did you see that baseball just released their schedule today?
No, I didn't.
Florida State coming to the EC
No way.
in April, I believe.
Of course. Well,
So,
I shouldn't say no way. They're in the same conference, so of course that makes
right.
sense. But that'll be a well-attended game, I would imagine.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Got that to look for. Oh, so now We Are Not Marshall wants an MLB podcast
Wow.
once a week. I tell you what, we might make some people upset if we
I
did
know.
that,
Seriously.
because we'll start having them jeering us with calls of fencing.
I
You
know, right?
remember that?
I
I mean,
do.
we'll try to work some baseball
Of
in
course.
when we can, but this is still predominantly going to be a Notre Dame football podcast, but we're going to work as many other sports in as we can. We're only in week 1 since
That's
the
true.
season has ended, and we
Yeah.
still have a bowl selection coming up. So we still got a lot of football to talk right now. So
Absolutely. And we're going to have an extra rapid fire show eventually. Like we're going to be doing some extra stuff now
starting
that we
this
don't
week,
now that we don't
extra
have
rapid fire.
a pregame show and a postgame show and a pond further review and all those. So Sean and I decided we're going to do a couple extra rapid fires. We're going to have some fun with it. And, because that's our favorite part of the show. Hello.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course. Yeah.
There you go.
See, Tommy says an MLB podcast will revolve around Chicago and whoever Sean likes, just like when him and Jesse talk NFL. It's always Cowboys. Well, I mean, we can, we slip some other NFL stuff in. We try to.
Yeah,
You're probably right. There's probably more Cowboys than any others. My MLB team, I am Royals, but I am also Red Sox and Cubs. So the Red Sox thing started like growing up in the 70s, like when the Royals were good the first time with George Brett, Frank White, all those guys. They would always lose to the Yankees in the playoffs. And so that's where I started my hatred for the Yankees. And so,
Makes
of course,
sense.
the Red Sox being, the Yankees' rival, it was easy to kind of get on board with that. But I also always watched, like even in the lean, I watched on WGN, I
Yeah,
would watch
baby.
Harry Carey and Steve Stone and, those games all the time before it went to, the current where like you have to pay for everything to
Brutal.
watch it. So
Brutal.
grew up watching that. So those are kind of the 3 that I'm in on the most.
Now, I have a bone to pick with Irish Chi-Town because everybody's kind of putting their favorite teams up, and that's awesome. You can't be a fan of both the Cubs and the White Sox. Can't do it.
Yeah, that's like a big Chicago foul, isn't it?
No, you can't be a fan
of
of both. I would never. In 2005, when the White Sox were in the World Series and they ended up winning the whole thing, people were like, "Oh, I'm rooting for the White Sox. I just want a team from Chicago to win." What? No.
It's like when John Cusack would get booed out of the South Side because he was like a Cubs fan already. They didn't
own
want him
it.
around.
Own it. It's
Yeah.
okay. Vince Vaughn ain't going to no Chicago White Sox games. You know what I mean? Like, own the fact that you are a Cubs fan. And yes, it was lean in the 2000s. I get it, right? But own it, man. Own it and hate the White Sox. That's what you need to do.
You got to do it.
I know.
All right. Well, that is going to do it for tonight. Great mailbag show tonight. A lot of people on board, listening, watching. I'm not sure there's going to be a show tomorrow because I do have that Notre Dame Maryland women's basketball game. Do you have some insight?
We will have a show. I did talk to Brian today, and we are planning on he and I doing the show together. It's going to be the Vince and Brian show, but there's a chance that show could be altered. So stay tuned.
Oh,
so
interesting.
That's
an altered show.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that. If you're a fan of the message board, there may be information on there tomorrow. So there you go.
And again, we will have that standalone rapid fire on Friday at some point.
Yes.
As well. So
yes, sir.
Got that.
Should be fun.
Thanks, Derek. Now get back to marriage counseling, if you will. All right. Hit the like button if you would on your way out tonight. If you haven't already, always appreciate it. Always appreciate you stopping in and listening. So Vince and Brian tomorrow, the rapid fire show with Vince and Jesse and I on Friday, a call-in show.
Ooh,
That would be interesting.
it's a
I don't know how
lot
we
of.
would make that work, but
Number one, it would be very difficult technology wise, but number
yeah.
two, you guys are nuts, all right. And bringing you on, you never know what you're going to get. So I'm obviously playing with everybody, but the chances of us bringing on somebody that drops a swear word or just says something that we just can't have is
Yeah.
way too high. I know Brian will never go for that.
Yep. Exactly. All right. We will talk to you later. Appreciate it. IB Nation Sports Talk.